He was outnumbered 100 to 1, and he smiled anyway. Down on the floodplain, 10,000 soldiers ringed a low hill like an iron tide. Drums thudded. Banners snapped in a wind that smelled of river mud and wet pine. On the hilltop stood one samurai and a few dozen villagers with carts, a bell from a roadside temple, and a thin line of faith. His name was Kaito. He wore a simple breastplate scarred by years, and he kept his helmet tucked under his arm as if it were a sleeping child. He studied the horde below with a calm that made the frightened steady just by standing near him. 10,000, the miller whispered, eyes wide. 10,000 is a story, Kaito said. We will make a better one. The drums paused. A rider in a red cloak came forward, holding a white cloth high. He shouted up the hill, voice clear. Kaito of the Coast Road. Lay down your sword. You are surrounded. You carry a town's grain and your lord's tax. Hand both over. Lives will be spared. Kaito raised a hand. A boy next to him lifted a speaking tube, a wooden cone used by boatmen on foggy nights. The boy's voice carried far. General Taizen, he called, your seal on that surrender note you sent this morning was crooked. You never let things be crooked. The letter is false. So is the story behind it. The red-cloaked rider stiffened. He made no answer. The drums rolled again, slower this time, as if they too were thinking. Kaito slid his helmet on and turned to his small group. Behind their hilltop ditch, sacks of rice were stacked and covered with canvas. Children huddled beside wheels. The temple bell lay on its side on a sled. The sky to the west was a dark bruise. The river that curved around the plain ran low, but the air pressure felt heavy, like a door about to swing shut. Kaito had counted the clouds since dawn. He knew a night storm was coming. We have until the first crack of thunder, he said quietly. Then we move. We will not fight them for this hill. We will fight the ground under their feet. The boy with the speaking tube stared at him. How? Kaito's mouth tugged up. By telling the truth loudly. And by making the river remember where it once ran. He sent 2 men to the old spillway on the north ridge with saws and hooks. He sent 3 to the willow stand with coils of rope. He sent the miller to dig shallow V-shaped channels into the hillside, each one pointing downhill like arrows. He told the oldest woman among them to tie strips of white cloth to long poles, the kind fishermen used to mark deep nets, and to dip the cloth in oil from the carts. Then he slid into a ditch and crawled to the hill's eastern lip. Through tall grass he watched the ring of soldiers adjust. They were a patchwork army, some in matching armor with polished spears, some in farm coats with faces that looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. He noted where the lines bulged and where they were thin. He listened to the rhythm of their drums. He watched who shouted orders and who tilted his head to listen before moving. He found the center of the wheel, a square of officers' tents behind the red-cloaked rider, guarded by 200 men who looked as if they had actually trained together. Good, Kaito murmured. You wanted to be seen. Back on the hilltop, the boy asked, do we have friends out there? Yes, Kaito said. We have water, wind, and doubt. The first twist arrived before the first arrow. A small party broke from the great ring, 20 riders carrying a black flag with a single white slash. They climbed halfway up the slope and stopped. A captain with a clean jaw called out, Kaito. We marched to arrest a thief. Then we saw the wagons chained to a bell and a crowd of grandmothers standing with sticks. We are not blind. Who is the thief? Kaito walked down alone until he stood within bowshot. He did not draw his blade. The thief writes letters, he said. He signed the general's name and stamped his seal at a crooked angle. He told you I stole tax silver to fund a band of drifters. I stole nothing. I am delivering food to a flooded district beyond the ridge. There is a storm coming tonight. You will either help me or help that storm. The captain stared and then looked back over his shoulder. For a breath, Kaito saw hesitation ripple through that section of the vast circle. Then horns blew from the officers' square. The riders snapped back into place, black flag lowered. The ring tightened. Kaito climbed the hill, heartbeat steady. He turned to the boy. That captain belongs to General Taizen, not to the man who faked the letter. He wants this to be clean. That is our door. The boy's eyes lit. So we push. We push, Kaito said. He moved through tasks like a mason setting stones. He checked the spillway team. The old dam above the plane had a side gutter built generations ago, an unused channel cut to take pressure off the main gate during spring melt. The gutter had been sealed with logs and earth when the river shifted course. Kaito ran his hand along the plug and felt the grain of soaked wood. He tapped here, here, and here. Cut there, he told the men, but do not pull. We will pull together when thunder speaks. He walked the willow stand. 3 thick ropes ran from the hilltop to trees on the far slope, hidden under brush. Along each rope, every dozen steps, hung small reed baskets packed with flint scrapings and pine resin. When I call for lanterns, Kaito told the oldest woman, do not light the baskets. Put your poles in the ground along the low ridge and wait. When I ring the bell 3 times, only then give them fire. 3 rings, she said, touching his arm with fingers that had kneaded bread for 50 years. We hear you. Kaito studied the officer's square again. He knew the name of the man who sat in the largest tent even without seeing his face. It was not Taizen. The real general was a soldier of careful habits. Kaito had crossed paths with him years ago, escorting a wagon train through a narrow defile at dawn. Taizen had a voice like low thunder and the particular calm of a man who counts for a living. The person giving orders today, fast, loud, eager to close, was nobody Kaito knew. The second twist came as rain on a dry road, sudden, cold, and honest. A runner scrambled up the slope, waving a cloth. He dropped to one knee, winded. Message, he gasped. For Kaito. The boy took the scroll, checked the seal, and blinked. He stopped and frowned. The wax was neat, the stamp sharp. But there was a stray grain of sand in the wax, and the corners of the paper smelled faintly like fish oil, the kind used by scribes on the coast. General Taizen's staff used cedar oil. Kaito's nose wrinkled. He unrolled it and read. The message claimed that Taizen himself had seen Kaito torch a grain house last month. It said Kaito killed witnesses. It warned all officers to beware tricks and to fear poison in the river. It was an ugly message in clean script. Kaito folded it and handed it back. Take this to General Taizen, he told the runner. Give it to him only if you can look into his eyes while he reads. If he looks away while you speak, leave. Tell him the man who taught him to count his steps on icy mornings says the stamp on this was pressed too hard. The runner swallowed. Who taught him that? His old quartermaster, Kaito said. Me. The boy looked at Kaito as if seeing a hidden room behind a wall for the first time. You served under Taizen? 2 winters, Kaito said. He never forgot a number. He would not forget me. The drums pounded again. Arrows hissed from the far edge of the ring, testing distance. None reached the top. Kaito looked at the sky. The bruise to the west had turned almost black. He wet a finger and felt the wind shift. He rolled his shoulders. First thunder soon, he said. Everyone to places. Who Kaito was, and why he was here, mattered now. The villagers already knew part of it. He had been born to a quiet house and raised with lessons in sword and brush. He had risen in a local lord's service by moving faster than other men when it was time to carry news. He was the man you sent when you wanted someone to arrive not only alive, but with the truth still whole. He had never once burned a field he could save with a shovel and a little sweat. A year before this day, he had uncovered a theft, a steward who took a handful of silver from every bag that passed through his hands. The steward smiled at Kaito like a neighbor and called it rounding. Kaito called it what it was. The steward had friends in the capital, and one friend in particular, a clever court man named Hayama, who wrote letters for the powerful and was paid to bend lines straight. Hayama did not use soldiers. He used paper and wax in fear of disgrace. The false message in Kaito's hand, clean as a blade, smelled like his work. Now the drums cut off at once. From the officers' square, a man in a white cloak stepped forward. He had fine, careful hands, the hands of a clerk, not a rider. He signaled. The ring of troops shuffled and then adjusted by units. Their front ranks lowered spears. Their rear ranks tied cloths around their mouths. The white-cloaked man lifted his arm like a stage conductor. "Smoke," Kaito said. "They will light the plain, push us uphill, and take the wagons in the confusion. They will use the storm to hide the ash." He looked to the willow stand and raised 3 fingers. The old woman nodded once. The first roll of thunder came like a giant turning in sleep. Kaito lifted the temple bell rope. He pulled hard. One deep note rolled across the plain. Soldiers looked up, surprised by a sound that did not belong to them. Kaito pulled again. The second note shook the air. He held the third for a breath and let it fall like a hammer. "Now," he said. On the north ridge, saws bit. The spillway's old plug trembled. 2 men drove hooks deep and leaned back. Wood groaned. The plug tore free. River water, held back for years in a side channel no one remembered, lunged toward its old path. It hit the slope and spread in a thin, fast sheet, racing along the V-shaped channels the miller had carved. It ran where Kaito had pointed, not in a flood, but as 100 silver tongues licking dust. It found the soldiers' feet. It made clay slick just as footsteps moved forward as one. At the same moment, along the low ridge, the white cloth poles woke. The old woman's people raised them in a long, curving line, cloth streaming in the wind like ghost banners. Then a spark leaped from the nearest reed basket. Fire caught the resin, ran along the line, and climbed the poles as a row of clean, controlled flames. It looked like a second army rising from the ground itself. In a heartbeat, the plain turned into a mirror of light and water. Horses balked. Boots slid. The front rank spears waved up like hurried wheat. The drums tried to find the beat again and could not. Kaito lifted the speaking tube. "General Taizen," he called. "Your men do not want to trample grandmothers in the mud. Your clerk wants you to. If you let him, this storm will drown more than a hill." The white-cloaked man shouted orders. A roped unit rushed the north ridge to cut the spillway. Kaito smiled without joy. He signaled left. The willow crew hauled hard. Hidden kites, paper frames stretched on bamboo, tethered to the rope, leaped from behind the trees, flying low across the soldiers' faces. Each kite carried a shell of dried gourd with pebbles inside. Wind filled the paper. The gourds rattled and thudded like distant hoofbeats. Horses reared again. One snapped a bridle and bolted. The neat squares of officers blurred into stains. The red-cloaked rider, the real general, rode forward for the first time. He took off his helmet so the hill could see his face. Even from a distance, Kaito read the set of his mouth. Anger, yes. But also relief at something finally making sense. Thunder boomed again. Rain began, fat drops first, then a sheet. The controlled flames on the poles guttered and went out on their own, they had done their job. The water across the plain deepened to ankle height, slow and even. The soldiers' ring sagged where the ground sank, and in that sag, men with farm coats began to inch backward, pretending not to. No one chased them. The white cloak moved, frantic. He pointed at the hilltop wagons. He sent runners with torches to light the canvas. 3 reached the ditch. 1 looked up and saw a row of faces, old, young, serious. The runner stopped. He could not raise his torch against a grandmother who stood there with a ladle. He lowered it. The other 2 hesitated, then threw their torches aside. They were grabbed and squeezed and told to sit in the rain and think about life. Kaido let out a breath. "Now for the part that hurts," he said softly. He stepped past the ditch, down the slope. He did not carry his sword in his hand. He carried a coil of rope. He walked in a straight line toward the officers' square. Arrows hissed low and stuck in wet earth at his feet. None came high, the archers were afraid of hitting their own. As he drew closer, 2 guards rushed him. Kaido slid half a step, caught the first guard's wrist, and let his own weight argue with the man's balance. The guard went down with a surprised grunt, not injured, only confused. The second swung a short spear. Kaido wrapped the shaft with the rope and pulled. The man stumbled into him. Kaido guided him past like a dancer releasing a partner. "I do not want to hurt you," he said, and meant it. The red cloak pushed through the confusion. He and Kaido stood face to face, rain streaking off their helmets. The general looked older up close, with lines at the eyes that come from long campaigns and long nights. "Kaido," he said, half a laugh buried in the name. "I should have known. You still count clouds?" "I do," Kaido said, "and wax grains in seals." "Taizen, you are being used. Your letter was forged by a court hand named Hayama. He works with a steward I once exposed. They want this hill to burn so they can point and say, 'Do you see? Only fire controls the wild.' They want fear to finish their work." Thunder answered him. The white cloak shoved between them. He had a thin, clever face and a voice like a blade tapping a bowl. "General, this man lies with a calm brow. He always did. Surrender the grain and these wagons, and we will sort the rest in chambers later, with dry feet." Taizen did not take his eyes off Kaido. "Is the grain stolen?" "No," Kaido said. "It is paid for and headed to the flooded district, if we survive this storm." "Did you burn a grain house last month?" "I saved it," Kaido said. "We broke a wall to let water out. Someone wrote a letter to make a hero into a thief." Hayama's eyes flicked. The wind pressed his cloak flat and showed the outline of a scroll case at his waist. Kaido saw it. Taizen saw Kaido see it. The white cloak stepped back. His voice got sweeter. "General, the capital wants results. It will not care which road brought them." "And I care," Taizen said. He reached and took the scroll case with 2 fingers. Hayama did not resist. He smiled instead, the way a man smiles when his plan includes 10 more pages than anyone else knows about. Taizen opened the case. He pulled out wax scrolls and a small, square stamp wrapped in cloth. The stamp showed Taizen's seal, perfect, sharp, almost proud. Taizen's jaw set. "My seal is with my paymaster," he said. "It is never in a clerk's pocket." Hayama's smile thinned. "We live in moving times, General." "Not that moving," Taizen said. The rain came harder. The plain was a shallow lake now. Torches shook and went out. The soldiers' ring loosened and came apart in sections, not from fear, but from the simple truth that wet boots slip and brave lungs get tired. Taizen turned to Kaido. "You could have run," the general said. "You could have taken the wagons and vanished into the hills." "I tried," Kaido said. 10,000 men got in the way. Taizen barked a short laugh. "So you made the river your ally again. Once you learn a friend's language," Kaido said, "you keep speaking it." Taizen raised his hand. Horns sounded, 3 long notes, clean and even. Lines that still held shape lowered spears and backed away as if the horns pulled them on strings. The ring opened. The hilltop suddenly had a path to the north. The spillway ran, controlled and steady, guiding the water into old gullies where it could do little harm. Hayama's sweet voice turned thin. "General, you cannot." "We can," Taizen said. "And we will." Hayama lifted a hand as if to call hidden troops. Kaito watched his eyes, not his hand. The clerk looked not at soldiers, but past them, toward a dry patch near the officers' square where 3 covered carts stood. He had planned more than one way to turn this day. Kaito moved. He reached the first cart as a man inside touched flame to a fuse. Kaito blew on the fuse and pinched it. The man blinked in shock, as if no one had ever thought to do something so simple in front of him. Kaito slid the fuse free and held it up in the rain until it went dark. "The capital's fireworks," Kaito said softly. "For night signals. Or for starting a panic." Hayama's mouth tightened. He had lost the clean end of the rope that tied everything together. Without it, his plan frayed in the weather. He did not run. He stood very still, as clever men sometimes do when the board flips. He waited for someone to save him. No one did. Taizen gestured. 2 guards stepped forward and took the clerk by the arms, not roughly, not cruelly, just as one would lift a piece of paper off a wet table and set it somewhere dry to think. "Hayama of the capital," Taizen said evenly, "you will answer for forged orders and for using my men as walls around your pride." Hayama tried to speak. Taizen's look made the words die before they could do harm. On the hill, the villagers began to move the wagons, 2 at a time, down the new path. The temple bell sled creaked and slid, guided by hands that had carried babies and sacks and fishing nets a long time. The boy with the speaking tube kept calling out, "Step slow. Keep the wheels straight." The oldest woman walked backward with her white cloth pole, marking a safe line along the slope. Thunder rolled past. The hard part was not over. The storm center had not reached them yet. The real danger lay beyond the ridge, where the flooded district waited. If the river swelled too fast, homes would float. People would climb onto roofs and hope. Kaito knew what roofs do when they are asked to be boats. He turned to Taizen. "Walk with me," he said. "If we do not reach the old stone bridge by moonrise, everything we did here will be theater." Taizen nodded once as if he had already decided. He set his helmet and called to the captain with the black flag. "You and your 20, front of the wagons. Everyone else hold the plane, keep order, and go home dry if you can manage it." The captain grinned despite the rain. "Yes, General." They moved out, a thin line into a wide night. The long ring of soldiers shrank behind them, becoming shapes in the rain and then memories. As Kaito and Taizen trotted beside the first wagon, the boy piped, "Why did you smile at 10,000? "Because 10,000 has corners," Kaito said. "Corners can be pushed." The path to the bridge ran through a narrow cut where the river had once gnawed the hillside into a letter S. A landslide years ago had left a scar on the outer curve. Kaito had walked it that morning and planted markers where the ground sounded hollow. He had counted his steps, the way Taizen always did on marches. Now, in the dark, he counted again. 27, he said under his breath at a particular willow stump. Then the drop. "Keep the left wheels high." Thunder cracked close, like a door slamming. The storm had arrived for real. Wind shoved rain sideways. The river, fed by the open spillway and by the sky, woke and began to speak. "Faster," Taizen said. They reached the bridge and found it breathing, stones slick, rails humming with water's push. Beyond it, lanterns bobbed like lost fireflies where the flooded district began. The undead light of lightning showed roofs low to the swell. The third twist was not a knife at their backs, it was a wall in front of them. The far bank had shifted. The old road had sunk. No wagon could pass without becoming a raft. The boy's throat tightened. "We came all this way." Kaito squeezed his shoulder. "This is the part no letter can plan. He ran to the wagons and kicked the wedges loose. Take the sacks in pairs, he told the villagers. Share the weight. Tie yourselves together in a long line. The river loves single men, it ignores a rope. Taizen was already moving, cutting spare yokes into flat slats. He jammed the slats between stones on the bridge to make steps for small feet. He looked at Kaito. The bell? Kaito nodded. The bell floats. They hauled the temple bell to the water's edge, tipped it lip up, and pushed. It bobbed like a stubborn bull. The boy climbed inside and banged it once with a padded stick. The deep note rolled over the water. Lanterns on the far shore swung in answer, and the shout that came back sounded like hope. Kaito waded in first, rope around his waist, 3 villagers behind him, then Taizen, then the line of burdened men and women, sacks across shoulders, balanced like dancers with the seriousness of people who have practiced this walk for generations. The current shoved and pulled. Kaito planted his feet and felt for stones with his shins, calling out, step, step, higher. Now lean. They went and came, until the wagons were light and the sacks lay in piles beneath eaves and on temple floors across the water. Children huddled under blankets with eyes like moons. A woman took Kaito's arm at one point and pressed something into his hand. It was a tiny carved fox. For luck, she said over the rain. He tucked it into his belt without looking down. By moonrise, the storm had shifted, spent for the moment. The river settled into a steady, angry run, the kind that breaks twigs and clears minds. The bridge held. The bell rang one last time, a softer note like a thank you. On the near bank, the last wagon wheels lifted off mud with a wet sucking sound. The boys slumped down, laughing with that breathless, shaky laugh people have after the wall does not fall on them. Taizen set hands on his thighs and breathed like a bull that had dragged a plow a mile uphill. Hayama, bound and dripping under a watchful guard, looked toward the far shore where warm light and steam rose from kettles. If he felt shame, it did not show. Calculations moved behind his eyes. But the numbers were different now. They counted sacks delivered, heads dry, a bridge that did not lose its stones. Taizen turned to Kaito. You refuse to surrender, he said, a statement not a question. Kaito looked at the hills, the river, the plain they had left soaked and stubborn. Honor is not a flag, he said. It is a direction. Taizen's mouth twitched. The capital will ask about today. They should ask about tomorrow, Kaito said. He nodded at Hayama. Bring him in clean. Make the charge simple. Keep the story simple. Let people eat. Pride can chase its own tail as long as it wants, it will get dizzy and fall down. Taizen studied him a long breath. Come back to my staff. Kaito shook his head. I carry news where it needs to go. Right now that is not a camp. It is the road. Taizen accepted that with a small bow that said he did not like it but understood. He pointed at the boy. You. What is your name? Run, the boy said, cheeks flushing. Run, you will remember this night, Taizen said, not unkindly. Tell it straight. Leave out the parts where fine men looked foolish in the rain. Keep the parts where a bell floated and a hill grew ropes. I will, Ren said, eyes shining. Morning came clear and washed. The great ring on the plain had melted away into units slogging home, shoulders sore, boots muddy, heads full. Some would grumble about wasted effort. Some would laugh at the memory of kites that flew low making silly noises. A few would keep silent and work better next time. Stories would bloom like spring weeds, and that was fine. People need stories almost as much as they need rice. Kaito walked the ridge one last time. He found his spillway cut and made sure the plug had lodged where it would not whip loose in the next storm. He set cairns to mark safe ground for anyone walking at night. He left the boy his helmet's old cord, frayed from years. For tying things you do not want to lose, he said. Hayama rode east under guard. He was still dry on the outside. He likely would remain that way. The capital did not like messy punishments. But he would sit in a long room and answer long questions, and men like Taizen would ask short ones in a voice like someone counting. A steward would find he had many fewer friends. Letters would be checked twice before they were trusted. By noon, the flooded district steamed under new sun. Children chased each other between woodpiles and were told not to run. The temple bell rested on a flat stone in front of the small hall, a dark ring around its lip where it had pushed through rain. A woman hung wet laundry on a line and said to no one in particular, "That bell can swim." As for Kaido, he took the gravel path that led away from the river, toward a line of hills that looked like sleeping cattle. He ate a handful of rice from a leaf and drank from a spring that tasted like stone. He took the tiny carved fox from his belt and set it on the next milestone for the first traveler who needed good luck more than he did. On the last rise, he turned and looked back. The plain lay clean, washed, honest. The wheel ruts were already drying into shallow scars. Banners were gone. Only the lines cut by the water remained, the old paths the river had remembered because a man asked it to, politely. People would talk for years about the day 10,000 surrounded a hill and went home wet while a bell floated like a bowl and a wagon train crossed a bridge on steps made of yokes. They would say a samurai, some used that word for any man with a sword, though it meant one who served, refused to surrender not because he liked glory, but because he knew surrender is not always peace. They would say he used tricks. He would say he used honesty and rope and the way rain falls. If anyone asked him who his allies were that night, he would say, a general who remembered to count, a miller who could cut channels straight, a grandmother who could make fire behave, a boy who could be loud in a storm, and a river that keeps a promise once you ask it in its own language. That is the story. It ends not with a boast, but with a road, one man walking east beneath a bright sky, boots squeaking, mouth curved at nothing in particular. He had seen 10,000 turn into corners. He had watched truth pull threads from a false cloak until the man inside stood blinking in the rain. He had stood on a hill and borrowed time from thunder. He had given it back by morning. And because people like a last image to hold in the mind, picture this, at dusk, children in the flooded district ring the temple bell once. The note rolls over the water, warm and full, and a fox-shaped shadow slips across a path where someone will find a small carving and smile. The legend is a whisper, not a shout, and that is right. A shout fades fast. A whisper lives in the way men and women lift a rope together and step in time, the way a general raises a hand and decides not to crush a hill, the way one samurai smiles when the world tries to count him out, and refuses to surrender.